BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Well, it is a windy December day, and this is our mini upload for the afternoon. So, on the major upload today, we were talking about Marianne Williamson and the politics of love. And one of the things that is very much involved with Marianne Williamson's political platform is the concept of peacekeeping and the establishment of a cabinet-level Department of Peace. If you get a chance to listen to the larger upload that we put out about Marianne Williamson, you can see that I spoke very highly of that. One of the things, though, that we have to examine with the concept of peacekeeping is a kind of a criticism that came to us from a YouTuber named Lisa Haven. I don't know if she's still online or anything. I haven't checked out her channel in about 2 years. 2 years ago, I checked out this one video that mentioned something about a quote-unquote report that the majority of UN peacekeepers are from Muslim-majority nations, and that was the sort of thesis of Lisa Haven's report. And I thought she was going to be going down the conspiratorial route, sort of in the Alex Jones tradition of the globalists have planned 3 major world wars. We've already experienced 2 of them, and the 3rd major world war that we will experience will be between Christianity and Islam. I thought she was going down that sort of New World Order conspiracy theory pathway, but she didn't. It just ended right there. And her thesis is just there are many Muslim-majority nations that contribute to the UN Peacekeeping Task Force, or the UN Peacekeepers, if we can just call them that, as opposed to a task force. And that's just it, full stop. And I was like, well, all right, look at Bangladesh. They've really stepped it up. I mean, I was just very disappointed that that was the entire summary of the program, because even if, though, you're going to try and make criticisms like that, as we said in our larger upload, we're citing Steven Pinker in The Better Angels of Our Nature, peacekeeping forces are very valuable because even though they have problems, they contribute to the overall benefit of humanity. There is a reduction in violent deaths if a peacekeeping force is doing its job. And this doesn't mean that the United Nations is perfect. No, absolutely not. If the United Nations were perfect, we wouldn't have things like the sex trafficking scandal from Bosnia, Catherine Bulkovac. They made a movie about her called The Whistleblower. Those types of things wouldn't exist. So what I think we can look forward to in something like the politics of love and discussing the possibility of a cabinet-level Department of Peace is recognize that we just really have to overcome certain prejudices and certain barriers, and that is easier said than done. Absolutely. Because the people who are going to be in agreement with that statement are already non-prejudicial for the most part. 99.9%. They're already in agreement with that. And the people who actually are holding some prejudice against somebody because of their religion or because of their skin color or because of their ethnic background, they aren't listening. Even if they somehow hear the words, it's not really going to connect with them. So it's a very difficult thing to overcome. And this is how you get to something like Marianne Williamson's A Politics of Love. Because she's sort of saying things that until we begin to think in a different way, we will never be able to have real and honest political discourse that will benefit the American people. Until we sort of start to recognize that the deeply rooted prejudices need to be sort of absolved, until we recognize that valuing all human lives, not only some, is paramount, then we're always going to be having the same problems. We're always going to be having people who are just going to be doing destructive actions for their own selfishness, or in other cases, as we mentioned, people will be doing destructive actions for just for power, in other words. So it's like, this is somewhat of a complicated task, though. How do we actually share the message of peace and love with a larger group? And I really think that Marianne Williamson is a much better spokesperson for it than I am, just overall. But even she says that it is a very difficult message to talk about, because a lot of people like putting spiritual teaching in this one category, and a lot of people like putting this type of political thinking in another category. They don't really want to cross over and kind of transcend the boundaries. And I do confess, though, it really does seem like something that is lacking from the political discussion. this whole notion of tribalism that exists in our political world, just one side good and another side bad, like the Democrats versus the Republicans. And it took even somebody like Scott Adams to stand up and say that 50% of the country is not wrong all the time. Even though he's a very passionate Trump supporter, he's like 50% of the country is not wrong all the time. And there's a certain sense of truth to that. So one of the possibilities that we could go about things is to just try to be bipartisan. You could run a campaign like John Delaney talking all about bipartisanship, the right answer, how to unify a divided nation. But that didn't really go too well for John Delaney. I mean, he's polling at 0% right now in the polls. Or we can really just sort of try to identify things from more of the root causes. And Marianne Williamson talks about this in A Politics of Love. What she says is that people are watering the leaves when they should be watering the roots. And it's like, if you just want to get up there and be like, hey, let's be bipartisan, that's just pouring water on a leaf that's going to slide right off. Bipartisanship is not a bad thing. Please do not misunderstand. Absolutely not. Multi-partisanship is not a bad thing. I may not belong to any political party. I might be a registered voter who's a nonpartisan affiliate, but multi-partisanship is not a bad thing. Bipartisanship isn't a bad thing. Why? Because they're about human beings working together. Togetherness and unity. But at the same time, what I believe Marianne Williamson is trying to add to the conversation is we will never be able to overcome these problems if we keep doing more of the same, until we recognize that people are being divisive, that people are being destructive, that people are being dishonest, selfish, manipulative, and they're just moving the public sector to their own advantage for power, profit, that whole thing that Charlie Chaplin talked about in The Great Dictator. Greed has poisoned men's souls. Until they overcome those types of barriers, then we're always going to be stuck with the same problems and the same barriers. People will need to begin to think in a different way. One of the first and foremost things we will try and achieve is just getting rid of some of this excessive tribalism that is bogging down the political conversation. Oh, look, many of the peacekeepers for the United Nations are from Muslim-majority nations. Well, so what? That's more of a fact than a thesis statement. I mean, and like, what are they doing? What are their actions? How can you prove that that is a problem? Or are you just trying to state that as a way to further prejudice, as a way to further excessive tribalisms? My tribe is good and your tribe is bad. They tried to get rid of that with the Bronze Age, for goodness sake, and we're still bogged down by the same problem. As long as there has been human civilization, we've had this problem of tribal thinking. And it's not to say that you can't have identity. It's not to say that you can't have self-determination and care about some sort of group that you're connected to. You most definitely can. But it should never be sacrificed for... like your integrity should never be sacrificed to achieve that. And honesty in the political process should never be sacrificed just for the sake of power. And first and foremost, one of the points that was very difficult for me to accept was, and I was very reluctant to accept this, I have to insist, is that we can have good actors in the situation. Part of me just believed that everybody was broken, that everyone was destructive, that everyone was messed up, and that no matter who got in power, they would be corrupt. But not all personality types are the same. Not everyone will respond to power in the same way. Look at our 45 presidents. Not all of them act the same way. Look at something like John F. Kennedy and Operation Northwoods would be an example of that. And, you really just can't say that Donald Trump responds to conflicts the same way that Barack Obama responded to conflicts. People are going to be different. Personalities are going to be different. But first and foremost, one of the things that I think is greatly missing from the political conversation is just recognizing the problems that are associated with excessive tribalism, as well as just the problems of greed and the lust for power that are affecting and bogging down this. And it's being exploited by people who are trying to further the discussion and keeping us divided so that they can conquer us. And the two-party system is absolutely guilty of that. And until we sort of have that love for humanity, that love and appreciation for all humanity, not only some, and I know you listening to this, you probably love every kind of person under the sun. I'm sure you do. But the rest of the world just isn't quite there yet. And one day, I hope within our lifetimes, we will see somewhat of a change. And we will see the way to cross these types of boundaries. And that we'll actually be able to have, the politics of love within our own lives. And be able to live this way. And we won't just be like, hey, somebody's different, therefore they must be bad. Until we break that, we will be stuck in this cycle that's just going to keep spreading out. Just more nastiness in the political discussion. Well, on to another day, my friends. Everyone stay safe.